all of the people that have prayed and poured into Brian and I need to know, like, the story of God's miracle in little Anna Pruitt's life, because it really is a miracle. And you hate to toss that word around like it's flippant. Like, oh, it's just a miracle. No, he chose her, and he is doing things in her that he decided he would do before he spoke life into the world, And when you think of it that way, you just receive it as a gift. Even the hard is a gift. It's just such a blessing that we get to see her day in and day out and get that reminder of what they said, what doctors said she was, and what she is today.
Rachel and Brian Harrison were coached to abort their unborn daughter due to multiple abnormalities revealed on a prenatal ultrasound. Their faith coached them to choose life. Today, Rachel Harrison shares the story of that challenging time and the gift they now know is Anna Pruitt. Welcome to A Stronger Faith, a podcast that gives you a front row seat as everyday people share the experiences that change their faith. I'm your host, Stacy McCants, and we pray that God uses this conversation to move you toward Him. Today, Rachel Harrison shares the story of how her daughter, Anna Pruitt, reflects the light of Christ against the longest of odds. Meet Rachel Harrison. All right. So, Rachel Harrison has joined us. She has escaped her home for a couple of hours and left the kids with her husband, 6 kids. Now, you got 6 kids, 2 dogs.
2 cats.
You got 2 cats as well. So,
no birds.
Age range of the kids?
My children, I have 1 son, he's 12, and then 5 girls, ages 10, 8, 6, 3, and 5 months.
So 12 to 5 months and skipping down through the whole thing. Now, from social media, I've seen the videos. So I would just ask you, how would you characterize a day in the life at the Harrison home?
Oh, man. A day in the life at the Harrison home is we are all a bunch of sinners just trying to glorify Jesus in everything we do. I homeschool, and so it's crazy. We get up and we pray and we start our day and we start our schoolwork. I've got 3 that are in different grades, which is hard. It's getting harder as it gets older. And then Anna Pruitt, who is our special needs baby, she just roams around with her little sister. I have to tackle that while teaching school. My big 3 is what I call them. They are really, really good at teaching themselves. So we've gotten into a groove with the homeschool thing, but it's definitely got its challenges. I mean, yeah. Some children, I won't name names, are running around without clothes on all day. And then the baby is she is so easy and so laid back. Brian and I pray that she stays that way. I mean, she's so super laid back, but I'm just kind of like, she has to be. We're a circus. We call ourselves the circus.
Well, I saw that. I was on your Facebook page not long ago in preparation for today, and it was back during football season, I guess. And I think the caption was that your husband Brian was going to head into another room and catch a little bit of the game in front of the fire, and I guess it's you video,
yes.
and I mean, literally 6 kids.
They were
running around, dogs barking, and it was it was like out of a movie.
I know.
And he's sitting there holding the baby,
so calm,
just very calm. Every now and then, as somebody was blazing by, he'd hold his hand up and get a high five, right?
Yes, it was so funny. I videoed because I was just like, what is happening? I looked at him because I was sitting by the fire. And the basketball game was on in the kitchen. And I said, why don't you come in here and watch it? I think it was basketball. Maybe it was football. I can't even remember. But, I mean, they were playing jump rope, I think, with, I don't even know, tape. I just was like, what is going on?
2 of them were riding type of vehicle. I guess your house has a loop around or whatever. It was so. I showed it to my wife because we've got 3 kids, and I showed it to and she talks about how stressful life is, and they're loud and getting out of the kitchen area. I was like, I got to show you something.
I know.
She's like, I would have a bottle of wine sitting right next to me the whole time for sure. So
I know our pastor texted and said, I'm stressed out just by watching.
It's the greatest thing is like,
yeah.
When I talk about people who have been given God-given gifts, I talk about people who are drawn to trauma, right, and blood and those kinds of things, and we call those people doctors. And I am not one of them. I'm the guy that's probably going to faint when I see those things, and I am thankful for doctors, right? We have people who like to speak in front of thousands of people, and there's other people that would just completely die if they had to do that. So God makes us all differently, and how you and your husband, Brian, can stay just even keel for the most part and at peace in some of those chaotic situations. It's a gift from God. And so
that's a sweet comment. I feel like I'm not,
I don't know. Yeah. And you homeschool 6 kids.
I do.
And
people tell me, you're superwoman. I'm like, I'm not. Come over. You would change your mind about me. I am woefully sinful, and I'm just praying that Jesus covers all of my flaws as a mother.
It's amazing to see that stuff. And but today is about child number 4.
Yes,
and
sir.
This is a special story. I had someone said, hey, you need to talk to Rachel Harrison. She's going to be a good one. She has done some stuff and gone through some things and experienced some things that I think would shine light on the kingdom. And so we reached out to you, and it's worked out for you to come over. So Anna Pruitt, number 4. Anna Pruitt had some complications. Is that a fair assessment going into that or in that pregnancy? How did you come to discover that there were going to be that Anna Pruitt was going to be different?
Well, we found out we were pregnant, so we were excited. All of my doctor's visits went really well. I remember, I think it was like my 24th week pregnancy checkup. And I had mentioned prior to that checkup to my doctor that I thought that the baby seemed small because I knew when we conceived for the most part. And so it seemed like it was 2 weeks behind from what I thought. And he just said, well, sometimes the measurements aren't good on the ultrasound. But this visit was one of the first that Brian didn't go with me. And he said, well, let me look. And so he looked at the ultrasound, and he said, I remember sitting in that room, he said, I think there may be some anomalies with your baby. I'm going to send you to UAB, which is a specialist in Birmingham, and get them to do a level 2 ultrasound to check out her ultrasound to make sure everything's okay. In that moment, I remember losing it because the word anomaly just sounds scary. You don't really, I've had 3 healthy children. I wasn't thinking there was anything wrong. And so we found out after that we were going to have a scheduled visit to UAB. Well, long story short, after tax season, my husband's a CPA. We always go to the beach. Well, we never heard from UAB, so I figured they'll just call whenever we're supposed to have our appointment. We were on our way to the beach, and they called frantically and said we missed our appointment. And there was a miscommunication, I think, from my doctor's office and UAB, and I think UAB thought they were going to call. Anyway, it was just a confusion. And so on the way to the beach, we had to drop my kids off with my parents and turn around and go to our doctor's visit in Birmingham. And it was a Good Friday. It was Good Friday, right before Easter, right after tax season. And it was literally the worst day of our life. It was the saddest day of our life. And so that's when we went to the doctor and learned of all of the things that were going on with her in I would say probably 5 hours doctor visit. Like, it was that long. It was excruciating.
So they laid out over a 5-hour window
It was so long.
the situation.
We did. We had to go in, and it was like this genetic teaching visit. So we had to wait first, and then we sat there and we had to watch like a 45-minute video on all of the different anomalies, they call them, or disorders that babies have that have these anomalies. So the Down syndrome, trisomy 13, trisomy 18. There was, I think, one more. And we just watched that video, and I remember Brian and I sitting in there, and we weren't laughing, like joking about what we were just watching, but we were like, surely this cannot be us. Like, this is so, like, far removed from where we're thinking. When we were thinking anomaly, we thought maybe she's just not growing. I need to eat more or something. We didn't know she was a she either, because we never find out. But we watched that video, and then just teaching us about the different disorders that babies could have. And then we went into a level 2 ultrasound, which took forever. And the ultrasound tech took, you can't even imagine how many pictures. You go into an ultrasound normally with your baby, and it's kind of quick, and they show you everything, and you're so excited, and you leave within 20 minutes. This was forever. Pictures of the brain, pictures of the heart, pictures of every single organ. She was taking pictures for an hour at least.
But why did they call you in? Did they already know this stuff?
I'm not sure. It makes me wonder. I don't know. They sent it off, and I guess with a regular ultrasound, maybe you can see something, but my doctor didn't say that. I think because they don't specialize in those, I guess, disorders or anomalies is what he called them. They send them off to a specialist to confirm it, I think. I don't think my doctor, I never asked him that. That would have been a good question if he thought there was something wrong, and he just was so sweet. He was such a loving, sweet guy. I drove all the way back to Montgomery to my doctor because I loved him so much. So I don't know. They just sent us for a level 2 to check every single thing because she seemed to be measuring so small.
Okay, yeah.
But I remember the ultrasound tech. I remember it sitting there. It was freezing. It's so quiet. And I would say, does that look okay? Does that look okay? And every single time she would say, well, just wait till the doctor gets in. She'll tell you. Just wait till the doctor. Like, they can't say anything. So you're just sitting there like, this is awful. Your emotions and your anxiety are like, what's really going on?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like she was cold. It was just very matter of fact. The doctor will explain. So that was at least an hour, probably an hour and a half of pictures. Well, then the doctor finally comes in, the specialist, and she took over an hour of pictures. I'm not even kidding. I was just like, this is forever. Like, what is going on? So at that point, you're thinking, this is bad, and and I finally asked the doctor, well, does the brain look okay? And she said, we'll get to the brain issues in a second. And I couldn't even swallow. I couldn't breathe. I lost it because I figured this is really bad because she's not answering anything and she's going to lay it all out. And Brian just grabbed my hand, and I just looked at him, and I just started crying. And he is my calm. He is so calm in a crisis. I'm not. He's just my rock. And so we waited till she finished, and she took out a little Post-it. And on the Post-it, it was a little yellow Post-it, and she wrote down these things on this Post-it. And she said, well, here's the deal. Your baby has 3 brain malformations. She has agenesis of the corpus callosum, colpocephaly, Dandy Walker. She has heart defects, kidney defects. She's measuring about 3 to 4 weeks behind. Her cerebellum is only 18 weeks, even though she's 24 weeks gestation. We believe that she is trisomy 13, and we can use the cerebellum measurement, which is 18 weeks, to abort her. At this point, they weren't saying her, they were saying it. I didn't even know if it was a boy or a girl. So I interrupted her and I said, is it a boy or a girl? I want to put a real identity to my baby who you're talking about. So, right. And she said, it's a girl. And so she went on to say, well, this is what we think. And trisomy 13 is a lethal diagnosis. And I just remember thinking that word is so awful. Lethal. I mean, like, lethal is not a word you think when you're pregnant, like maybe terminal. I don't know. Just that word just stuck with me. And she said, since her cerebellum is 18 weeks, we can use that measurement to abort this baby, because Alabama state law, which, I mean, I never thought I'd be discussing this with a doctor, is 20 weeks. You can abort up to 20 weeks. And so they were going to use her measurement of her cerebellum, even though she was 24 weeks. And I just was like, what is happening?
Wait a minute. So this is all going on. Was there ever a chance for you to like
mourn? No.
Digest this?
No.
You and Brian go and sit for a second.
None.
This is all happening as the pictures are still on the screen?
It is. It was awful. We were just, after she gave us that Post-it note and she told us these were the things that were wrong, I'll write them down. And she's trisomy 13. She's lethal, and you can abort because she's not going to make it. She's going to die. We were just like, what? I mean, we didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. Then after that, and it was so cold and so, and honestly, looking back, I don't know how doctors do it. Like delivering that news. So I had some compassion for her after that day. But after that, they put us in this tiny room for like maybe 15 minutes to process it after all that. And then she came in and said, hey, you can, if you would like, take a blood test to determine whether or not for sure she has trisomy 13. And so Brian and I sat there and were like, we just were told our baby is lethal, suggesting the best case would be for us to abort her, but we could take a blood test after they suggested to abort her to see if she actually was trisomy 13. I mean, it was just it was the hardest day, and it felt like we were out of our bodies. It wasn't anything we'd ever experienced, and too much to process. I
mean, could you not call a timeout and say, I mean, because it sounds like this is like a business transaction, right?
It was.
It's like, hey, look, you're at Home Depot. Do you want a refund or not here?
Right.
It's like, whoa. This is not what that is. We need to get together on this thing. We need to talk to each other and see how each other feels and what God's saying to us or whatever else it is. It feels like from what you're describing that there's really not any time for that in this conversation.
Right. There wasn't. I mean, it was just presenting what was there with her diagnosis. And then I think that I remember when she said that after the suggesting terminating, I looked at Brian. I was like, no, we're not doing that.
Were they suggesting this all happened like now?
I think so.
Did they want a decision in that moment?
So. I think so. Because then they set you up with a genetic counselor after that, who basically walks alongside you to kind of coach you towards that direction. And Brian and I were just talking about this today before we came. I'm wondering what their reason is behind that. Like for doctors who save lives, there has to be a reason why they would want that. I get it from a standpoint of a mother feeling so hopeless and helpless, but like, what would their reasoning be ultimately? How do they justify that being the best option? For one, we're human. I mean, we are fallible. We don't know, Mm-hmm. God numbers our days. We don't know. But sitting back, we're talking today, how many women feel so scared in that situation, that they don't know what to do, that they just believe that, and this is the best option, in that moment.
Well, yeah. So doctors that have to deal with delivering news of a bad diagnosis, a cancer diagnosis, or whatever else it may be, I guess I can see that a little bit more. And I'm sure that if we had someone here that was an OB, right, that could talk that language, it could probably speak through that more. My logical next question would have been, what was your reaction to this news? And I don't know that you had time or given a chance before. It feels like they've pulled you down the line a little bit to make some kind of decision. I wanted to know how you guys processed this news that your fourth child had some major, I'm not sure the right word, complications, anomalies is what they used, and just how you absorb the blow.
Well, I don't really think we absorbed the blow, except that I remember Brian thinking, is she going to suffer? And I don't remember if he asked that then or if he asked that later on when we talked, because the genetics counselor, when I tell you it wasn't just a suggestion, it was an encouraging, almost forceful, pushy thing. Because I remember after we got to the beach, which we had left the doctors and gone home and shared all of this with my parents, and we told our children right away, because what we do is we suffer together and we rejoice together. So we wanted them to know. They were so young. I mean, only Ren, my oldest, probably realizes a little bit what was going on. But we finally had to say, or Brian did, because I couldn't even talk to the genetics counselor, because at that point I was just angry. I was angry that I had to even have this conversation. I was angry at just the coldness of the whole thing. When you're having a baby, like, it's usually this happy time. The only happiness that I had there was, and it wasn't even happiness, it was the sweet, sweet nurse who took my blood to actually prove if my baby had trisomy 13. She just loved on me and rubbed me and said, I'm so sorry, baby. That's literally, I think, the only I'm sorry and compassion I felt that day leaving UAB. I just remember Brian finally forcefully said, look, we don't believe this way. This is not an option for us. We're not doing that. Because they assign you a genetics counselor to kind of counsel you through this grief process and how this will work. And just the constant, but you only have 2 weeks. You only have 1 week to make this decision. Like, we're not making that decision. That's not what we're doing.
Were they saying that she was going to have a rough life, or were they saying that she was going to die? That
she would die. That she would not.
Like, die when?
Die after she was born. So, like, she would be born and then she would die within minutes.
Minutes?
At the most hours is what they said. Which is why they kept saying it's a lethal diagnosis.
So they felt like that she would be born, you'd go through this whole process, and you would have her for at the most a few hours.
Yes, sir.
I guess medically and technically, I can see why they would offer that as a strong option.
Right. Because the hurt and the suffering that you would have to go through. I mean, and that's another thing I had to wrestle with, that anger towards God. I mean, if I'm being honest, I remember my mom at the beach saying, you sound so angry, Rachel. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to watch my baby die. I didn't know why God chose me to walk this path. And I mean, I was going to do it, but I didn't want to do it, and with that said, I didn't think it was my call to determine, because of my faith and because of who I am in Jesus, I know that He numbers our days, not me. So I knew the right answer, but it felt completely different, in that moment. So, and for my husband, he felt so strongly. We didn't sleep at all. It was awful. We just tossed and turned because it was such a blow. I mean, just trying to process it. It doesn't even take a day. It takes so long. And the blood test was to come back within 2 weeks to confirm the trisomy 13 or to not confirm the trisomy 13. So that 2 weeks, we named her. I named her the night that we got to the beach after that diagnosis. The Lord gave me her name. Anna means grace, and Pruitt means brave little one. And I've never liked double names. Even though I'm Southern, double names are big in the South. I just haven't. But I wanted her to have a strong double name for her tombstone. Like, that's literally the conversations we were having. Where are we going to bury her? Do we want to bury her where I'm from in Montgomery, or Marion where you're from, or where we live? There was this sweet little graveside, and we talked about burying her there so we could walk and see her. And then even things like, well, I'm going to get your mom to make her a dress, like things like that you don't expect to be talking about, but that you were prepared for, or talking through, because just to cope with the news that you just heard. And then the sweet time with our kids, telling them, the doctors say your sister's sick and she's probably going to die. I mean, it was just a lot, and the anger went to, I think that in the grieving process, you go through different things. The anger went to sadness, to anger, to sadness, in that 2-week time. And I had to remove myself from the doctor and the genetics counselor. My husband took all that on because he's so much better at being strong, I guess, than I am. So he had to put the foot down on that with the abortion and terminating the pregnancy, that we were not going there. And so that's the road that we walked. And she's now, goodness, almost 7. So it's crazy putting myself back in that time of what all God has done for her in her life. It's amazing. It truly is a miracle. Her life is. So
yeah. So, but back in the moment, you've got your core beliefs, and it seems like you're already, seems like you just think of things from a spiritual perspective right away out of the gate anyway. You probably weren't thinking about the mechanics of, all right, if we were to abort. That just was like, sounds like it was never
right
on the table.
Correct.
Even though they felt like it was kind of the default answer to this solution to this problem.
Right.
It doesn't sound like you guys debated that or discussed that as an option.
Right.
Because of your belief in life, it sounds like.
Right.
In God. But there's sort of not just the abortion piece, but the circumstance, the overall picture of what's going on. How did you process that stuff spiritually? Was there a spiritual component to the way you were processing the grief? You said you were angry. Were you angry at God? Were you angry at the situation? Were you angry because there wasn't a better answer? So what were you angry at? And number 2, how were you guys processing this spiritually?
I would love to say, because I'm so strong in my faith, that I wasn't angry at God. But if you believe God's sovereign and He is in all things, then when you're angry, there wasn't anyone to really be angry at but Him, because I realized He chose Brian and I to walk this journey. Psalm 139, to answer your spiritual question, I literally just read Psalm 139 over and over and over and over again the entire pregnancy after that. I don't know why that verse came to me, but I just read it. I think probably because most of the time when people have babies, you talk about before, my inmost parts were formed, you knew me, is in 139. But that whole chapter is so beautiful. But I think I didn't understand why. I don't, how this could be, why this is happening, and why God chose me. And I did not want to do this. I don't want to do this. But with that, thinking I'm going to have to do this. So how am I going to do it? So it was all of it. It was, this is what they told me is going to happen. And so I remember praying it's so funny because after watching that video, we prayed, Brian and I prayed that she would have Down syndrome. Because of all the things, we were like, please just let her have Down syndrome. That's a gift. Like, that is the best of all of them. Please let her have that if she's going to have something. And then also I prayed, I don't even know if I shared this with Brian. I'm sure I did, but I would pray constantly that he would take her in miscarriage. That was just what I prayed. I would pray, Lord, please, if she's supposed to be with you, please take her in miscarriage, because I don't want to do this. I don't want to hold my baby into death. I want you to take her, because I didn't think I was strong enough to do that. I didn't want to do that. I just didn't want to do that. And so I just remember praying that a lot, and praying for her, little, like, she was so little that most babies you can feel kick and stuff. And with that anger at God, I would feel her little twinges in there, and like tiny, you could barely feel her, hiccups. And I was like, they told me she's not going to breathe on her own. Like, she's going to die, and I can feel her hiccup. And I know that hiccups mean that she's working her diaphragm. That's what they've always said about practicing for breathing. And so I would hold on to those little things of her inside me, as well as toss back and forth with the anger of I didn't want to do this, and just clinging to God's word. That is the only way I got through it. I had a friend give me a book called I Will Carry You. It's by Angie Smith, and she carried her baby who had trisomy 18, and that was a life changer for me. I think I read that in a day, and then I reread it, and she talks about the beauty of grief and the dance between joy and suffering. And that's really what you feel. You've got this dance going on where you're suffering, but you know that the joy comes in Jesus through it. And so I think that spiritually, I just dove into God's word and read the Psalms. I think that's what I was doing. A friend said, read through the Psalms. David cries out to God in his, and I think David was angry at things and wondered where God was. And so I did, and I stumbled upon 139, and that is just where I stayed. I would read that every single day in its fullness. It is so good, the whole chapter, about how God forms us and he hems us in behind and before. And that stuck to me because he hems us in behind, like he knows our end, but he knows the beginning too. And so it brought so much peace to read that and to pray with Brian and talk through all of this, knowing that as hard as it was going to be, he comforted me and said, we can do it. We can do it as long as we have each other. We've got each other, my husband and I, which is another component that's such a gift in this, to have a husband who is for you and comforts you and is with you and prays with you and tells you we're going to be okay. We're going to make it through no matter what. That's just kind of where God led me through all of that, especially in those 2 weeks where we thought for sure she was going to die.
Yeah, so backing up a little bit, when you talk of this, and even in the beginning part of the conversation, I know we're on a faith-based podcast here, but it sounds like you guys were pretty deeply rooted spiritually before walking into this situation. How'd you come to faith? Where were you guys, both you and Brian as a couple and your family, from a faith perspective when you got this news?
Well, I don't even remember when I became a believer. I was young. I grew up in the church. So did Brian. He grew up in the church also. I think he said he was baptized in high school when he really professed his faith for Jesus. And I was young. I mean, I think I could say I was always a Christian. My walk certainly did not exemplify always being a Christian. I rebelled a lot, headstrong. But in our marriage was, our foundation was Jesus from the get-go. that was important before we got married. That was going to be the basis for everything that we did with our marriage, with our children. We were in a good church. We saw life through the lens of Jesus and the Word. And so our faith was strong, or so we thought. I think that we know the right things that we believe, and we say we have faith in God, but when something like this hits you head on is when you really come to the test of where is your foundation. Is it in us both, or is it in Jesus? Because it'd be real easy to just say, I guess we lost the baby or whatever. It would have been easy. That probably maybe would have been the easier route, because it surely is not easy having a special needs child. It's got its own suffering component now. But for sure, I feel like because we were so grounded in our faith together and individually and together, that's what got us through it. 100%.
Yeah, I just kind of picture the two of you from the way you're describing it as sort of in this sort of secure spiritual place rolling into this thing. A lot of people are in places when they roll into spots of adversity are not in a place where sometimes that's where they either find faith or just abandon it. In fact, I hear a lot of people that, come to a stronger faith because of the adversity. We've had a lot of people on here that talk about the importance of the foundation being in place going into the adversity, and without that, they think they would have really struggled to manage that and to come out on the other side whole. And it sounds like you guys were on pretty firm footing spiritually going into this, such that when you heard this news, your first response was sort of spiritually based.
Right.
It's like, well, first of all, that's aborting our child is not an option for us.
Right.
That's just not on the table. I know it might make it easier at a certain place and over time, but that's just not an option. So you rolled into that thing in a pretty strong, it sounds like, spiritual place. So the prognosis here was that Anna Pruitt would not survive the first 24 hours.
Correct.
At all. So what was it like in the room when she was born? Were you guys just expecting this to be a few moments? Because I think if it is, and I've been in the room for 3 births of my children, and there's a lot going on, and it's a joyous moment and all those other things. What was it like immediately after she was born?
Well, my blood pressure was through the roof. It was crazy. That whole day was crazy. So after they did that blood test to test if she was trisomy 13, it came back negative, that she did not have trisomy 13, but that she still could have it. We were like, what? Everything was so negative. Everything was, she still is 1%, because we've never seen 3 brain malformations like this. We've never seen, we usually have one of them, but not all 3 together. So there's just no way that we can say that, confirm that she's not trisomy 13. Plus with the kidney defects and the heart defects and the size, we just think that that's the case. So we basically put...
I got to ask a question, because I don't know the answer to this question.
Yep.
Tell me what it means to be trisomy 13.
Trisomy 13 is one of the lethal, quote unquote, diagnosis. Trisomy 13 and trisomy 18. Typically, these babies die within hours. Trisomy 18 has more to do with the heart. Trisomy 13 is basically you have so much, I don't want to say I don't even know the right word. Our bodies are so unique. God made them so special. So many things going wrong within your major organs that you can't survive.
Right.
Like, so that's basically
so
what they
out
said.
of the norm.
Out of the norm. It's not just like, okay, we have a heart defect, so we can go in and fix that a little bit or tweak it. She had so much going on that's typically those babies don't make it. And so when they said Dandy Walker and colpocephaly and agenesis of the corpus callosum, like that is, Anna Pruitt's missing the whole center portion of her brain. she has the left and right hemisphere. She has no nerve endings in the center of her brain. All of that is completely absent. And then her cerebellum is really, really small. And so they still were trying to convince us, I guess, that she was trisomy 13 and wasn't going to make it. And up until her birth, it was the same. She's going to either not make it. She's probably going to have a breathing tube. She's probably going to have a stomach tube. She's not going to be able to eat on her own. We don't know how much she's going to struggle or be delayed. They would say her retardation, how severe it will be because of how much is going wrong with her. And then she kept falling behind as far as weeks of gestation. So she was only 3 pounds and she was full term. So she just kept getting smaller because she wasn't growing. And so the day that she was born, our pastor was there, our friends were there, our family was there. We were supposed to deliver her at 9. I didn't deliver her until 2. It was traumatic, even up till her birth. I mean, they put 2 different women in front of me. They kept sending in residents telling me the same thing over and over again. She's probably not going to breathe on her own. Are you prepared? She's not going to eat on her own. You're not going to get to see her. You're not going to get to hold her. I mean, it was constant. So they finally wheeled us back at 2 and they delivered her. And I figured it was my specialist delivering her because that's just what I thought. I didn't know till after the fact that I could have signed a waiver that I wouldn't have had to have all the residents because UAB is a teaching hospital. I didn't know all that. I wish I would have known that, or maybe I just was so distraught I didn't read the paperwork and I just signed it.
Yeah, sure. Paperwork was the last thing.
Right. And so I had a C-section because with babies, they take them in C-section because the trauma of birth, they say is bad for them. So, but it was a resident. And so she was born and they sliced her head open during delivery. So, I mean, the whole thing.
Intentionally?
No, not intentionally.
It was an accidental?
Yes. On top of everything that was going on, right, they cut her head. So, bad. Like she grew hair and we called it her patch later, but she grew hair in that one spot where they put the steroid because it was like an inch cut where he cut the scalpel too far into my womb. So that she was gushing blood and she looked horrible. And I hate to say that because she's my child, but my first thought when she was born was she's trisomy 13. Like she didn't have ears. Her face looked really mangled. Her little body wasn't normal. I mean, she did not look right. And so of course my blood pressure was 250, like skyrocket because I was so panicked about what was happening, But they wheeled her off. She was screaming. Like she came out screaming. So she was breathing.
Yeah.
My mom I think that was God letting them cut her head. So she had to scream and that helped her lungs. And I'm like, maybe so,
yeah.
But so they wheeled her off and they got her on oxygen and all that. And they had to wheel me to recovery. I didn't see her, or Brian saw her and was with her, or not with her, but from a distance saw her, and they took her to clean her and do all the things that they do and check her. But I saw her in passing. And the one thing I remember is my family all coming to see me because they got to see me and hug me, and I just crying and them telling me how beautiful she was. And I just remember thinking, she's not like, and then the guilt of thinking that I think that she's not. So then I felt bad that I'm such a horrible mother because I thought she's not okay. Like something's wrong with her. And the nurse finally had to tell all of my family they had to go because my blood pressure really was so borderline. Like I was having a panic attack. But that whole day was such a blur because it was one thing after another. They blew all my veins. I have the best veins. The whole thing, there was nothing easy about any of it. And looking back, I'm just like, that's God's grace making it so hard because then after her birth, it's like when it all became easier because we expected the worst. And so the little miracles just kept coming after her birth, which was just crazy. Things that we didn't expect.
Yeah. So what are some things you didn't expect? They laid out some pretty dire expectations for immediately after she was born, what it was going to be like, and likely her passing. What things happened that you didn't expect?
Well, she was breathing on her own. They never had to intubate her, which is a miracle and crazy. They just had to put oxygen on her. They let me breastfeed, like pump, but she's so small. They wanted me to pump, and I would get just a little bit of breast milk on a Q-tip, and they would try to put it in her mouth. Things like that we didn't think that we would be able to do. They told me I wouldn't be able to see her for days. And I saw her, I think it was over 12 hours, but it was like after midnight. I don't even remember the time that I got to go. They came in and said, you can come see her, and I got to hold her. And she was so tiny. That was a miracle. Brian and I lost it. Everybody had gone home, so it was special because it was just me and him.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when they came in and told me, typically with C-sections, you're not able to really move that well. They wanted to wheel me. And I was like, oh no. If my baby is fighting, I'm walking down to see her.
Yeah.
I don't need a wheelchair. They tried to force me in a wheelchair. I'm like, nope, I'm going to go. And I remember stopping in the hallway on the way down, hugging Brian and telling him that I loved him so much. And I said, because we were about to go see her, I said, did you know, like, that she would look different? Like, did you know? And he's like, yeah, babe, I kind of figured that she would. He's like, you are literally either she was going to be miraculously healed or she was going to die. You're never an in-between person, and I am, but that's okay that you're not. And I just remember in that moment thinking, I'm so blessed that God gave me a husband who loves me in spite of me,
Yeah.
Because here I am feeling guilty and sad over my thoughts about our child. And he showed such grace there. And our marriage has just been so much stronger. It never was not strong, but so much stronger. Just after having her, just to be able to come together like we have has been such a gift. It really is a gift because it can cause so much stress. She does cause stress now that she's older, but we're on the same page, So it was amazing. I got to hold her, and like she was tiny, and I got to do skin on skin with her, and I got to express a little bit of breast milk and put it in her mouth on a Q-tip. And I remember leaving and seeing a resident, and I said, or maybe this was later, this might have been 2 days later, but she nursed. We were like,
wow.
How? She's so small. I ran out, in my performance-based, I'm going to in-your-face person that I am. She just nursed, and the doctor was like, she can suck? Like, they didn't think she would do anything. They didn't think she would eat. They didn't think she would breathe. They didn't think.
Well, and I guess I'm a little surprised. I would think that when she's out, it sounds like they sprang into action to save her life.
Right.
And if she truly wasn't going to make it,
right,
that at least she could have this moment with you and him.
Right.
In my mind, I was thinking that they were going to deliver her and they would place her with you. But
now they did do all that comfort care discussions before. I think that we talked about all of that before the blood work came back, about if she is this. But you're right. Like, I've never even thought about that. If they thought it was so bad, they did rush to save her life, to do the things. But I don't even remember now, looking back, if they asked us to do that. Like, if they asked us what would we prefer if that was the case. But they did. You're right. They jumped into action with her. They intubated her, or thought they were going to intubate her. I guess it's one of those things, like you said.
Maybe the laceration started that. Who knows?
I don't know, to go fix that up, because they did have to glue that and fix that, and it was a huge gash. But they did. And that is such an excellent point. Like, if you think that they're not going to be okay to the point where termination is the best option, and then when they're born, to jump to such measures, how do you reconcile those two?
Yeah, well, it looked, maybe there was some hope there that maybe they didn't anticipate before, but I'm glad they did, and it's so cool that you, in a few days, are able to breastfeed her.
I know.
And hold her skin to skin, and it not be these dreaded last moments that you were probably expecting going into that.
I know. It is. It was so sweet. I remember we were real private about her. I mean, our small group of people that we loved, and my parents and family friends, but there was no media post. I mean, I would post Bible verses, and I think people that I wasn't close to on media realized something was going on. But we didn't really post anything about it until that night. I think after we saw her, we kind of just opened up about it all. And then her story, I think, touched so many people because nobody expected her to really be here at all. And so many people were praying. And so we felt all of the people that have prayed and poured into Brian and I need to know, like, the story of God's miracle in little Anna Pruitt's life, because it really is a miracle. And you hate to toss that word around like it's flippant. You know, like, oh, it's just a miracle. No, he chose her, and he is doing things in her that he decided he would do before he spoke life into the world, you know? And when you think of it that way, you just receive it as a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Even the hard is a gift. It's just such a blessing that we get to see her day in and day out and get that reminder of what they said, what doctor said she was, and what she is today. That doctor that delivered her, I remember we had so many doctors, neurosurgeon, neurologist, urologist, cardiologist, endocrinologist. I mean, all of the doctors. And we would be at Children's a lot. And I would go every time to try to see that doctor. And I could never get her. I painted her. I like to paint, and I would paint angels. And I painted her an angel for her to keep. And I gave it to the nurse one day. And so finally we met up, and it was the day before Anna Pruitt's birthday. And she came out and she was like, "You've been so sweet to come by. I have your angel painting in my office." And I said, "I'm so glad that you got it. I just wanted you to see Anna Pruitt," because she was the one that said terminate her and she's not going to be. And I like kind of forcefully, it was like, "I want you to hold her, you know, hold her." And I wasn't being ugly. I was happy. I wanted her to hold her. And the first thing out of her mouth was like, "You just seem so happy. You seem so happy with how she is." And I said, "I am. She's alive," you know? And that has stuck with me so long, because I think in our culture, what's easy is deemed worthy, you know, and what's hard is like, we don't want what's hard. We want fast, instant gratification, quick fixes. We don't want to have to deal with the hard. And so I have that picture, and I love it, and I keep it, and I repost it every year, because she said she wouldn't eat or walk or talk, any of it. And I wanted her to see what God did for Anna Pruitt, you know. And so it's the sweetest little picture. She's just the tiniest little thing, and I just love it. And I do love it that she kept my angel painting, because I don't know, like, I wish I'd got more time to share with her or spend with her to see, you know, like from a gospel perspective, talk to her, you know.
I think your hope is probably that she gained maybe a fresh perspective
right
on circumstances like that. And I know she's trained to offer potentially logical options, I'm assuming.
Right.
And who knows, I'm speculating there, but you showed her a different way of viewing that. And I don't know, I'm sure it'll make a difference down the line. But for Anna Pruitt to basically have been written off as someone who is going to not make it the first 24 hours, and of course she's almost 7 years old now, which is amazing. But those last weeks of pregnancy and in the birth and the first weeks of life, and don't want to over anticipate this, but I would think that there must have been times, either in hindsight or even in the moment, where you said, that was the hand of God, the presence of God somehow in the events leading up to her birth and then afterwards of this little miracle. Did you have any times like that where you felt like that was just straight out God?
I think so. I think those moments came a lot after she was born. Of course, we knew, that it was the Lord saving her life when she was not trisomy 13. I think that even though they said there's still a 1% chance that she is, we felt that that was the Lord showing us to just rest in Him and that He has this. And so from that moment, there was always this dread of going to Birmingham and having to hear the doctors every ultrasound, because I had to go every 2 weeks. And I remember Brian and I being like, okay, it's Birmingham Day. We're going to go and we're going to listen, but we're going to block everything out that they say. Because every time I'd go, I would get back down into the pit of despair.
Yeah.
And so we would just say, this is Doctor Day, and we're going to go and put a smile on, and we're going to listen to what they say, and we're going to just trust the Lord. But within, I think it was day 3 after her birth, they were doing an MRI to check the brain malformations that she had. And we were just hopeful that we would get some good news, but we figured it wouldn't be good news because the doctors had said these aren't repairable. So all the brain malformations she has, it's not like something you can heal or fix. It's just that she's missing portions and then things are off. So my children were staying with my mom and dad, and my dad had texted me that morning and said, Rachel, I just want to tell you the sweetest prayer that Ren, that's my son, prayed last night. We were sitting there praying and saying our prayers, and he prayed, Lord, I just want you to make Anna Pruitt's brain like everybody else's brain. And Pop, that's what we call my dad, he said he cried and said, that's such a sweet prayer, buddy. And then he prayed for Anna Pruitt that God would protect her and heal her. And that text came within a few hours, or maybe, I think my dad even told me after we found this out, the doctor had come in and said she does not have Dandy Walker, which is, I'm not even aware of what it is, except for it's like Rain Man, the movie. It's that type of disorder with your brain. And so I don't know which portion of your brain it actually affects. I think it's the cerebellum. Her cerebellum was small, and it still is small, but I think they assumed because of the shape of it or the form of it, it was Dandy Walker. She still had the colpocephaly, which is her ventricles are not shaped normally, and then the genesis was still there, but the Dandy Walker was gone. And so I remember calling and telling my dad that, and then they showed up that day because it was the first day I think that we could see visitors. She was in a box. She had jaundice real bad, and so they couldn't touch her or anything, but Ren came, and he did not want to see her or touch her. He was scared to death because he thought she was going to die. Like, we told her that that's what the doctor said, and he didn't want to look at her because he was scared. And I just remember looking at him and saying, you know what, buddy? Not only is she not going to die, but the thing that you prayed for, one of her brain malformations is gone. And you prayed for that, and the Lord healed her of that. And he jumped probably 5 feet from my dad into my husband's arms, and we just lost it. It was the sweetest thing because he was crying because he was so scared to look at her, and just the feeling that his prayers were heard. And I just remember all of that afterwards. Mommy, I prayed so much. I prayed every night that she would not die. And God listened to me. He saved her. He saved her. Just that with your children, getting to do that with your children is so special. Because, as adults, we can get cynical and we can pray and we say, we know that God's will is going to be done. But do we pray asking and seeking, knowing that He has the capability and the power to do immeasurably anything and more than we ask Him to do, or do we just pray things Like, I know you're probably not going to do this, but I really would like for you to do it, And so to have that childlike faith be so present in our life was so special to see, and something that we'll always remember. And we always tell that story to him because my girls were so little. He was only almost 6 and my girls were 4 and 2. So they don't really remember that much. But anyway, that was so sweet that we got to experience. And then there were just little things that happened after she was born, like the little story that I think I told you about taking her to Hobby Lobby. It was just such a random thing. I was loading up the car with everybody, and I did not see this lady anywhere. And we had been going to doctor's visits over and over again. It was still like, she still has this going on. Her kidney dilation is still there. She still had her heart defect. So we were going to the doctor every week. And I just remember all of a sudden I'm trying to load Anna Pruitt up into her car seat. And this lady, I turn around and I was startled because there was this lady standing there. And she said, "May I touch your baby? May I pray over her and touch her?" And I was like, "Sure. Yes." And so I got her out of the car seat, and I was kind of scared, not in a bad way, but just kind of like taken aback. And she just prayed over Anna Pruitt and asked for the Lord to heal her, and that by his wounds may she be healed. And it was the sweetest thing. I just lost it crying. And I turned around and she said, "Thank you for letting me pray for her. This child has touched me so." And I didn't even see her in the store, and I didn't see where she came from. She was just there. And I put Anna Pruitt back in her seat, and then I shut the door, and I couldn't find her. I was like, "Where is she?" And so I called Brian, and I was like, "I think that I just met an angel. Like, I really think an angel just came and prayed over Anna Pruitt." Like, I'm shaking now thinking about it because it was just so spiritual. Like, it was nothing I've ever encountered before. It was out of nowhere. Anna Pruitt was so tiny, so it's not like she is now where you can see that she's disabled and special needs. Like, she's so little. I mean, I'm sure like if they looked really hard, but like I said, I didn't see her enough to where I would see that she'd seen Anna Pruitt. And it just was the sweetest thing ever. That encounter, that was all God just giving me encouragement, because I'll be honest, Stacey, I struggled in the beginning with how small she was, how different she looked, just processing all that when you have quote unquote normal kids and going into public and feeling different, and the stares and taking all that on was just a lot for me. And I remember Brian reminded me of this today. We had to go to the eye doctor, of course, all the doctors. And we go and we take Anna Pruitt, and the nurse calls us back. We had to wait for a while. This eye doctor is amazing in Birmingham, and all the children go and see her, I think, because, I mean, she's just so wonderful and they love her. And so we were waiting for a while, and the nurse called us back, and she made eye contact with Brian and I, and then Anna Pruitt, and like she just started crying. And she didn't say anything. And so she walked us back into the room, and then she turned and looked at Anna Pruitt again when we got in the room, and she said, "The doctor will be here in a second." And she was crying, and I was like, "Are you okay?" She's like, "I just saw Jesus just out of nowhere." She's like, "I don't think you understand how much this just blessed me today, but I saw Jesus. I see Jesus in her." And we were just like just looking at her eyes, just things like that out of nowhere through her life. Those are things that you never will forget, that you keep close to you, that you get to experience, that people probably think, "Oh, that's just, emotional Rachel or whatever." But I mean, it was like something was different with her that radiated God into the world, So I feel like those things were the hand of God, just reassuring us and loving us through the unknowns, so many unknowns.
Yeah. So what was your spiritual life like during this time? Were you guys doing anything differently? Was prayer different? Were you closer spiritually, you and Brian? Did you do anything differently?
I think that our prayer life was definitely different. And our prayers with our children were so much more open and so many more conversations where days can be so busy. I miss those times. Like I said in our chatting before we got started, when there's suffering and pain, there's this need at all times for Jesus. I feel like when everything's going okay and everything's all right, or what we think is all right, we push God to the side, not intentionally, but because we've got this on our own, And so I feel like there was just this desire to be so present with him in all of that, because he is all we need, and he's honestly all we have, and he is the giver of all things good, and anything that is good is from him. So Anna Pruitt's life is from him. Her Dandy Walker being gone is from him. Our children's prayers are from him, And so I feel like that time was it's just so all full of God, like just this fullness of him during that you don't really get unless you're walking something almost tragic or sad or the suffering of it. Like, I don't know if you've ever listened to Joni Eareckson Tada. She's so amazing. Her story is so great. But just how you don't know the nearness of God until you're suffering. And it's so true. Everything in the outside is drowned out. What you typically and normally care about just seems to go out the window. Milestones for kids, we're just like, what milestones? All of that became relative. We just didn't, it changed our whole perspective on life in general with all of our kids, because we have these things that we measure and we decide if our kids are this or if they're that, and goals that you want to attain. And it all changed with her, because we just were so grateful for anything and everything that we got with her. So I feel like that is where God changed us the most, was just our whole perspective of life in general.
Yeah, and I see that and I understand that, and I can't help but think that going through a thing like that is going to certainly alter your trajectory in a completely unexpected path. I guess I'm wondering, did any of your spiritual habits change? Did you find yourself praying more often? Did you pray differently? Granted, I understand that this was now your fourth child, so time is probably still at a premium, and maybe even more so given the circumstance. But I'm just wondering if I'm asking, we're sitting here and it's like, how did you manage this as a Jesus follower? Did you get closer to Jesus?
Definitely.
Did you read scripture more?
Way more.
Did you have a different plan around that?
No.
What did prayer look like?
Right.
Did you still grapple in prayer? Did you still argue a little bit and ask for healing a lot? Or was it different? Was it more gratitude or...
More gratitude, and thankfulness, thankful for her life. I remember right before she was born, I prayed with Brian in the room. We read Psalm 139 again. And yes, I dove way more into scripture. Like I said, that book that I read, it would give a suffering scripture and then it would give a joy response scripture. And so I used to flip through all of those pages and reread all of that because it was just so good. Because there's so much lamenting in the Bible, and then there's a response, a joy response. And I feel like after she was here, my spiritual life changed from asking God for things to thanking God for things. Definitely in the Word more, definitely prayerful more. I think I prayed more for my anxiety as far as worrying about what other people thought when I'm in public, because people from the beginning were ugly. You think they wouldn't be, but they are. Just seeing a baby that's different when you are out in the public. But for sure, I feel like, life seemed like my view of pro-life and what I thought changed immensely. I looked back and thought, you know what? The Lord has prepared me for this since I was little. I remember going back and thinking through all of that once she was here, because my dad's best friend was quadriplegic and he was in a wheelchair, and I loved him. Like, he was like my second dad. And then one of my teammates in gymnastics, her brother was disabled, special needs, in a wheelchair. And then a boy I dated in high school, his brother had Down syndrome. And then when we moved here, the first person I saw at church was Hank. I don't know if you know Hank Poor, and he's cerebral palsy. And it was like, looking back, he kept putting these people in front of me that I loved, that I was around a lot, preparing me for this, even though, like I told my husband, did you have a clue that she'd be like this? I had no clue I'd have a special needs child. I thought, like he said, she would die or she would be perfect. I didn't have any in between. And so I think that I look back and I thank the Lord for those little things, and being more present in life in general, not just flitting through life, but noticing things and being more present. And just our speech, how I talk, who I talk about, involves the Lord way more now because of all he does. Whereas, typically when I don't know, maybe it was just me. I always had a trust in Jesus and a love of Jesus, but it wasn't always on my mouth. I feel like once you go through something like this, it is all you can talk about is Jesus and what he's done for you. And just the thankfulness for her, it really was like a light bulb. Like, I went from joy to joy all the time. So much so I had people asking me how just like that doctor, but other people that were close, how are you so joyful all the time? You're so happy. But I was just thankful she was alive. I really prayed the day that she was born to, please, Lord, just let me sing Jesus Loves Me to her. Please just let me hold her and sing Jesus Loves Me to her. That's all I want to do. If she goes to heaven, I just want to be able to sing that, because I sing that to all my kids and hold them and rock them. That's what I've always done. I sing all these songs to them. And I got to do that, Granted, sweet Anna Pruitt is deaf, but she knows that I love her. Hopefully that she knows that I've sang Jesus Loves Me. I need to learn the sign, but she doesn't understand sign language either. So I feel like, I don't know if that answered your question, but I feel...
No, yeah, you dug into Scripture more, and your perspective on some things changed, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You prayed early on, and we do this. We pray like we know the path. We pray for things that we want. You even prayed, I think you said, if she's going to struggle, let this end in miscarriage. Or let her be Down syndrome, right? Have Down syndrome. And, we kind of see potential solutions, and lots of times we basically ask that my will be done and that he do my will, right? This is how I would have this, and we don't always go to thy will be done. It's often my will be done. I've got a plan, God, and here's how I would like to see this happen. Given the circumstances that you've delivered, here's how I'd like to see it happen. I don't think there's anything wrong with going to God and petitioning him. I mean, that's a piece of prayer, and he tells us that when we bring things to him, he wants to give us good things. So I guess my question is, what did you learn about the nature of God through this experience? Maybe you have a different perspective on the way God operates that you just couldn't have without the gift of a difficult situation.
That is such a great question. I was listening to a podcast. I love listening to podcasts about the goodness of God. And something that resonated with me was the word good, how we use good as human beings. We think good is easy, just like we talked about with the abortion. Good is what we want, like everything going our way. But he said good is arbitrary. It's an arbitrary word to God. So what is good by God's standards might not look like what we want it to be. And so I don't think anybody prays for a special needs child. I don't think anybody says, Lord, give me that. Give me hard. Give me suffering. Give me this child that I'm going to have to care for. Like once we had her, Brian and I know that she's going to be with us until God takes her. You know, she's not going to most likely go off and get married and be on her own. She's going to be with us, which is in and of itself a thing that you can either let affect you or you take on with joy. And so I think that has stuck with me as for all circumstances. What we consider good is so different than what God considers good. And when he tells us that he does all things for our good and his glory, it doesn't mean that he's going to give us money or give us these awesome things. What's good for us is longing to be closer to him. What's good for us is drawing us to himself. And what grace and what mercy to give us things that make us have to submit everything that we have to him alone, you know? And I feel like that's what he did in her life. And daily, when I get antsy or I get ill or I'm mad about something with the kids, I'm reined back in when I look at her face, because she's probably never going to write, and she's not going to talk. She can't talk. And to refocus, that is what's good in the hard. She's in diapers still. You know, I'm probably going to always change her diaper. She doesn't understand how to go to the bathroom. I have to help her go to the bathroom. She can't do it on her own. You know, things like that when I'm like, I don't want to do this today. It's so hard. This is so hard. I have those thoughts. My kids have those thoughts. She's hard. You know, it's frustrating for our family because she can't talk. So she does a lot of moaning and groaning and frustration because she can't talk. And that aggravates my children who are quote unquote normal because they want peace and easy. And I have to constantly remind them, God didn't just give her to me and your daddy. He gave her to you. And he is teaching us through her. And so that is good. That is a grace that everyone's not afforded. And so I always want to make sure that I check myself when I'm getting frustrated and welcome that hardness, because it points me to Jesus, you know? And I think that is what has changed my view on God's goodness. That like you don't just read it that God is good, so he's giving you good. What your standard of good is. Your standard of good is way lower than what God's good is for us.
That is so rich in spiritual truth that if we worship the God who is infinite intelligence and infinite goodness, the rule must be that his understanding of good is going to be perfect. And what we think of is good is imperfect.
Right.
And we have to know that he's working all things together for good, and that his view of good way trumps ours. And we have to rejoice in that when his definition of good is tough for us,
right,
or painful for us. We don't see it as good. You put it better than I did. I don't know that I need to even try to re-articulate that. That was really a strong deal. But it should give us hope, right? It should give us hope
right,
in suffering. It should give us hope in the difficult times, knowing that God says, I'm the one who knows what is good, not just good for everything, but good for you. And those are the things I'm doing. There is pain and difficulty and challenge in your life right now, but I see something you don't, and I'm doing this for good. And one day, you'll see. Just trust me. You'll see.
Yes, the trust.
So that is so good. What a great insight. So how is he not just changing through this, your perspective on life, but how is he changing your faith? Is it through that? Is that the acknowledgement of God's good in your life outweighing your good? Is it something else?
Absolutely. I think that's it. And then, watching other people suffer and what they suffer through. When Paul says, we rejoice with those who rejoice and we mourn with those who mourn, it allows us to literally do that, mourn with those who mourn. If we realize that God's goodness is better than our goodness, it allows us to have so much more compassion for those who are mourning, because we can put ourselves where they are and love them better, because we're not trying to promote some kind of good outcome. We're able to share the truths of who God is and his character through his word with people when we have suffered, and then when they are suffering. And so I feel like that's been the gift for me, to have to go through this hard, because without going through this hard, it's not that you have to have hard in order to be able to share Jesus. You don't. But it sure is sweeter. There's a more intimate relationship there that you get with Jesus when you have hardship. And so I feel like that for sure has changed just my outlook on everything. I have friends still that say, I just need, and this is not to boast about myself because I am not this, I just need to be more like you because you just don't care about that, and you don't care. And it's not that think I'm better than anybody else. It's just like, this isn't our home. This is not our home. This world is not our home. And the only thing that matters is our relationship with Jesus, and sharing that first and foremost with our family, and then going into the world and sharing that. I mean, especially now after this year long, it seems, so much sadness. This is not our home. This is just a blip of eternity. But it's fleeting. It goes by so quick. And so I pray that anything that comes out of me is from Jesus. Now, it is not always. I mean, you can ask my kids. But that I want them to know that this life is, yes, we are here for a purpose, for sure. And just like your podcast, I mean, you're here for a purpose to help other people's faith grow. It just so, I mean, it's the only thing that's important, and to hopefully reach someone who's never heard the gospel before and hasn't felt the love of Jesus that I have been blessed to feel. But that's all that matters, is that we understand that eternity is real, for one thing, and that's where we're going, and that's how we should live our life here to point to that, Mm-hmm.
You think about the way Jesus managed and handled children, his perspective, what he says about children. You think of the gifts that Anna Pruitt has been given. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel like she's interacting with heaven mm-hmm. in a way that us, quote unquote, mm-hmm. normal people don't see?
100%. My poor other children, because I'll fuss at them like, be quiet. It makes me cry because I want to be there where she is, She will go outside in the yard and she'll just swing her arms and rolls her head. I mean, and I think people would probably say, oh, that's just her because she's special needs and she's off somewhere. But she will walk and she'll swing her arms and she'll look up to the sky and she'll smile and she'll walk in a circle and she'll dance. And sometimes she just rolls on the ground, and I'll video her. I have so many videos of her where I just send to Brian and I'm like, she is off. And I swear, I think she is with either angels or she's with Jesus, and she's got some kind of direct line straight to him that we don't get to be a part of. Like, we're not invited to. She's there and we're not invited to it. And just the other day, I think I sent you this video, like when she's eating, she can't hear. So there's so much noise going on in the background because I've got so many children, and one was watching an iPad, but she can't hear all that. She was eating, and then out of nowhere, she just starts like clapping and looking up and then pointed up like somebody just told her something, like, and she's like, I got it. I'm all good. That's how I interpreted it, just watching her. And it just makes you want to be where she is. She rubs her head. She's like bald on one side because she constantly rubs her head. I don't know if it's just something that she just does because of her special needs, but she'll rub her head and walk around like she's entertaining angels or dancing with Jesus, which makes you long for heaven so much more, because she's there. Like, why can't I be there?
Yeah, and Jesus talks about being thankful that sort of the kingdom of heaven is sort of exposed to the what maybe he calls the simple and kind of hidden from the wise or the intellect. And
so true.
You sent that video. I did see that, and I watched her, and she was like moving in rhythm to something.
Something, right?
I mean, it was perfect and
then
beautiful.
Clap? I know.
And then she would look up, and yeah, I've seen those things, and I just, in my own observation, is like, something's going on
It's
there.
worship.
She's
sort of
connected
worship.
to something. That's not random,
Right.
chaotic maneuvers. It was something that was directed someplace. That's what I saw. And
Me too.
I'm a Jesus follower, and I believe those things. And anybody that can raise themselves from the dead after telling everybody they were going to do that, I kind of believe what they say. And so when we get indications of things that he described in his way, and we see them in today's world with someone like Anna Pruitt, you just know there's a spiritual existence going on there that, you're right, we're not invited to that, at least right now.
Right now, right. But then again, pay attention to it.
Absolutely. And learn from it. And just like everybody shut up and
soaking
listen.
in. I know, right?
Everybody be quiet. Pay attention. Listen, this is a real thing that we should learn from here.
Right.
That's how I would see that.
Me too. I mean, we get that gift to do it. And my son will be like, be quiet. Watch Anna Pruitt. Watch. He's my firstborn. Has to tell everybody what to do, So, but it is. I mean, it's such a gift. And those moments are so treasured. We don't know the number of our days. That was written in a script, which also gives us, to me, the older I get, that gives us a sense of peace. I don't know her lifespan. I remember my grandmother asking me that. Now, how long is she going to live? And it made my mom so mad. Nanny, you don't ask that. Because we don't know how long any of us are going to live. But it does make you soak up every single moment like that and cherish those moments like that. And I'm prayerful that my children pay attention, because as they grow older and they go out in the world, I pray that God through her has touched them in a way that changes them, that they're not worldly. They want to be heavenly too, in the world, of the world, but not, consumed by it. So yeah, it's just a gift. Those moments so far outweigh the hard of it. And so I'm just so thankful. I'm thankful that for God's grace and mercy that he gave us, through his word, the wisdom to not terminate her life, because she is a gift.
How has she given you gifts? I mean, you think on it now and you have those moments where you see that, man, she is rocking in a heavenly realm right here for sure. And what a beautiful thing that is. But there's also challenges and difficult times. But you know she's a gift. How is she a gift?
She loves in a different way because she can't say that she loves us. She can't hear us, but she'll mimic us in like ways that you know that she somewhat grasps what we're doing. It's just crazy because for how little that she has, and she can't talk and she can't hear, what she does know is so crazy. Like she now, I don't know, but I think that she can somewhat maybe read lips. I don't even know. She's got so much going on with her brain. Sometimes you think, oh gosh, she's so smart. She understands. But like we'll teach her sign language and she'll do the same sign for 50 different things just because she's learned the sign. You know, it's just that missing piece where she's not just deaf. She has a lot going on with her brain. But then she'll stick her chin out like she's trying to give us a kiss, you know, and like she just does this. She doesn't know how to use her lips and kiss like we kiss. And she'll hug, and the new baby, she'll pay attention to the baby. And typically she's scared of all that. She's not really, that's not her thing, but she'll touch her head like she's trying to be like we are, or she watches what we do. And just how when she goes off in her another world, my children love it. They think she's the most amazing thing ever because she's just off and she has fun and she laughs all the time on her own. And so there are so many things that we just forget the outside, whatever's going on, and just enjoy her and want to be like her. For a long time, my 3-year-old kept going, because that's what Anna Pruitt does. And so I have a video of them because Anna Pruitt can't talk, so she moans. So she'll, and then Ellis was going, and she can't hear her, but like she can see that she's doing something. And I'm telling you, it went on for like 10 minutes back and forth. And I was just like, I'm hoping that Ellis knows that that's not how we talk, but it's just like she, who's 3 years younger than Anna Pruitt, it's amazing what God has given her. It's like she knows, and she knew from a young age that Anna Pruitt was different. So like she takes care of her and nurtures her, and that's how she's a gift, because in ways that you can't teach but are caught, like it's caught, not taught. That's how she's changed us, because we catch the things that we see with her and we marvel at them. Like I say that all the time, but I do. I just marvel at her because you can't help but just watch her and wonder. And then when you trust God and you know He formed her inner part, like He made her this way. Who makes the deaf man deaf and who makes the mute mute? Is it not I? He made her this way for a purpose, for His purpose. So, I mean, that's how she's a gift. And she's tiny. I mean, she's tiny. She's like my 3-year-old size, even though she's about to be 7, and she's real thin. And so that's a gift, because I can hold her and care for her. You know, the older she gets, it's going to be harder. If she's bigger, heavier. And so that's a gift that God made her tiny for me, so I can care for her and I don't have to get help. There's just so many things that daily we get to see when she wakes up. I mean, she's a mess. You would love her. Everybody loves her.
Well, she's a child of God, and she's not just a child of God, but He is in her a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He is in her and comes out and expresses Himself through the things that she does and says. And, you know, from the videos and the things that I've seen, and I've enjoyed those videos so much, but watching her and your 3-year-old run down the street hand in hand. And when you were talking to Ellis on that one video, and I know that nobody listening to this probably knows what I'm talking about, but it was a beautiful video. They were sitting on a couch together or something like that. And you were talking to Ellis about her being your best friend, and Anna Pruitt just is looking at her, and then she like almost nods and moves her head next to her. it's like she's hearing everything that you guys are saying, and she's responding in her way. And I don't know. I just see Christ in that so big, and she's just got this beautiful smile, and not just on her mouth, but in her eyes when she's interacting with Ellis in that video. I was like, we need to make notes on that.
No, it's sweet.
We need to learn from that. And so the older I get, the more I believe in the spiritual life, and the stronger I believe that it is, and that things aren't occurring that are obstacles that we've just got to overcome, but these are things put in our way for God to move us closer to Him and to teach us more about Him and His way. And so when I see those things, and I'm not there every day. You're there every day. I'm not there every day. But boy, those were certainly beautiful moments that you captured and shared, and I hope you keep doing that, because the face of Christ is the face of Anna Pruitt, and I think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But given that, and especially with Anna Pruitt in that situation, what would you express to other people about what's important? What's kind of the message behind your experience that's your life?
Well, for Anna Pruitt, I would just say that all life has dignity, and all life is precious, and all of my children's lives are precious. We just have the unique opportunity to have a special needs child who gives us a little extra. With the hard, there's so much joy. I mean, so much joy that overcomes any of the hard, because it's just so priceless. You can't contain it. So I would definitely say that all life has dignity, and even in the hard and the suffering, there's so much beauty and just so much Jesus, like you said. Like, I see that too. I see that. I mean, I know she's my child, but it's almost like she's separate from me in a way, because she's so different. And so it's privilege and it's an honor to be her mother, because she points me to Jesus so much where I lack, And so for sure, I would just tell people to take pause and trust God in what He's doing, and that He doesn't make mistakes, and that He chooses those people, whoever He calls to suffering, for a purpose, for His good, like we had talked about, that we don't see. And we, as a family, chose to have 2 other kids because it seems that there's a stigma behind special needs kids where it's so hard that, and the suffering is so great that you stop kind of, because it gets so hard. Both Brian and I wanted her to be able to be a big sister, like a big something, not just that she's the last and she's, not a lost cause, but that she can't be something more, in her life, or that she's not special enough to be a big sister, or she can't handle that, or she's not smart enough. And it has been a gift to watch that, for her to be a big sister, because you can tell, even though she's not like quote unquote normal, you kind of get the sense that she knows it a little bit, that Ellis is her younger sister. And then of course Blake is so little, but watching her with the baby has been crazy, because she'll just pet her kind of like she knows that's a baby, where normally she wouldn't pay attention to that. And so I would also encourage everyone to not see special needs as a burden, but to embrace it, because I pray that she changes my children's life. Like, the more kids that I can have to be around her, for them to be changed by her, which of course is Jesus in her. I don't think that she's got some kind of superpower. I think it's all, like you said, it's spiritual. It's the Lord. To have the chance to be around her before they go into the world, I think that is a gift in of itself. And so for Brian and I, yes, it's crazy, and yes, she's harder, but we tackle it together, and my kids tackle the hard, because life is not easy. I mean, it's not easy. My kids are not going to, this isn't the only hardship they'll face, having a sister that they don't want to help change diapers and they don't want to help load in the car. And when we're in public, she throws her body on the ground and she's taking her diaper off because she's mad. I mean, that can be embarrassing, but they literally, that's the life they're called to, and they do it so well because they have to. And so that gives them, I feel like going into the world gives them an advantage to just not be so consumed with the world and what everybody else thinks, because they have had to do challenging and hard things that lots of people are never going to have to do. And also prayerfully, they'll love others so much better. Others that are normal and others that are special. Like my kids notice, they love anybody that they see that's special needs. They're like, Mom, I think that kid's got special needs. Look how cute. Like they're drawn to that. We wouldn't have necessarily been drawn to that. I'd love to say that I'd teach my kids to be drawn to that, but I don't know if I would, if she wasn't a presence in our life like she is, So I feel like those are the things I would tell people, and just to teach your children to love the special.
I'm thankful you chose life, and I don't think it was ever a choice for you, but without that, we are all robbed of the beauty and the face of Christ that is Anna Pruitt. And I'm thankful that you were able to go into the world with her to teach and to show the face of Christ in the different, right? God is straight up in the different. And,
He is.
And we got to see him. We got to see him in life. What a beautiful story. And it's a story of life and a story of Christ in the least of these. And some pretty magical moments that you've caught on video, and I hope you keep sharing those things. But you carved out time in your day to share your experience and your family and your very special daughter with us so that we can learn and so that we can draw closer to God. And I hope that it reminds us of who he is and where he is, and to look for him because he's there in the awkward moments and in the challenging times, but and in the least of these. And
Amen.
So thank you.
And thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
We may do this again when she's a little bit older. See how it's all shaping up.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear the other cool things that's coming ahead. So
I know. Thank you so much, Stacey.
Thank you, Rachel. Brian and Rachel had no idea what to expect when they chose to proceed with the life of their unborn daughter. They just knew they couldn't make the decision to intentionally end it. So what have they gotten? I'd say they got some real challenges. But I think they'd say they also got the priceless presence of Christ himself on a daily basis in the face of Anna Pruitt. Thank you for joining us today on A Stronger Faith. If you want to help us, you can pray that God uses these conversations to draw more people to himself. That's what we pray for. You can also point us to people you may know who have faith-shaping experiences that should be shared by sending an email to connect@astrongerfaith.com or with a message on Facebook or Instagram. You can also help us by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts or your favorite player so that more people can find these conversations easier. Until next time, I pray for peace and a stronger faith for you and those you love.